who is from the great county of Cook, just above us. And she is running to upset one of the lead managers of the impeachment. And I don't know if you know this, I just happened to look last night for some odd reason, nosy I guess. So I looked on the TEC website to see the filing reports. Who would you guess the #1 contributor to our Rhino Republican Stucky? #1 contributor is? Wrong. He's #2. #1 is Texans for Lawsuit Reform. Who are they, you might ask? That's a good question you can ask Attorney General Paxton if he's ever heard of them. They're the ones that kind of led the charge. So now we know where our Rhino Republican stands. Not with us. He stands with Texans for Lawsuit Reform and Dave Phelan again. He just doesn't get it. So, has nothing to do with what she's about to talk about, sort of? Okay. It does. Carrie Kingsbury.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Carrie Kingsbury, and I am running in HD 68. I am your neighbor to the northeast in Cook County. And I am running against somebody who is very, very much like Stucky, and his name is Spiller. He was one of the House managers that led the impeachment charge. Now, talking about, let's look at the money, same situation. David Spiller was funded by Texans for Lawsuit Reform. He was funded by Dave Phelan, and this was before he was even elected the first time. And they're continuing to fund him. When my opponent, Mr. Spiller, was support Dave Phelan in appointing Democrats to chair positions and other powerful positions. So let me explain to you what I understand about exactly what's going on here. Because I was very much like you, wondering why, for many years, we've had a Republican House of Representatives that can't get anything done for Republicans. Why is that? Well, our representatives tell us they're working really hard. It's just very difficult. It's, you know, they've got those Democrats. Well, let me tell you something. What's the biggest problem we have in America today?
Immigration.
Democrats. They are doing their best to ruin this country. They are tearing apart the moral fiber of the country. They are indoctrinating our children. They are, trying to turn them against the America that we know. And guess what? That's the biggest problem we have in Texas today. That's the biggest problem we have in the Texas House of Representatives. We have Republican representatives in rural conservative Texas that are Democrats, rhinos, Republican in name only, and that's because they're actually Democrats. Mr. Spiller, who I'm running against, like many others, actually registered Democrat, voted Democrat most of his life until 2010, when he started voting Republican, because living in such a rural area in Texas, you're not going to prosper, and you're certainly not going to get voted into office as a Democrat. So what do? You run as a Republican, but then you go to the House of Representatives and you work hand in hand with the Democrats. And that's how the Democrats are in power in the Texas House of Representatives. That's why the Texas House of Representatives is non-functional. All right, what did we have in this last year? They were in session all year long. And in the special sessions, which cost you over $4 million in, all of the costs associated with it, they worked a total of 39 hours. They showed up, they gavelled in, then they gavelled out, and they went home for 4 days. Nothing got accomplished until the very, very end when they got a bill on the border passed. Listen, I'm not going to argue with something happening at the border, obviously, but this is not a great bill. We cannot arrest 300,000 immigrants or illegal aliens, not really immigrants, illegal aliens, coming across the border. So what are we doing? We're bringing them in, we're giving them money, we're giving them cell phones, we're giving them at least 7 years of freedom and probably much more freedom than that. We're paying for their education, we're paying for their health care. I mean, this is just a terrible, terrible thing. There was a very good bill that came out in the first session, and it died. And, you know, that's the story of what's gone on in the legislature for the past couple of years. And that's why a lot of us who aren't politicians, I'm not a politician, I'm a business person. I had a business for many years, which I'm now fortunate enough to have 2 children I can hand it over to. So this is called retirement for me. This is what it looks like. But, which means I'll be a representative 100% of the time. I don't have another business, I'm not an attorney, you know, doing that sort of thing. This is what I'm here to do. The same thing with Andy, this is what he's here to do. We are all trying to fight to get these establishment Republican in name only guys out of office. And if we can, as a group, get into office and fight together and take the House back to actual Republican hands, to actual conservatives, to actually represent you all, our constituents, you know, conservative Republicans, maybe we can do something. We can actually go into a session and get things accomplished. That would be so refreshing to see that happen. Another thing that I know you all are very aware of is this ridiculous impeachment. I mean, here we are watching the Democrats carry on this sort of thing against President Trump from day one. One thing after another, after another, after another, and it's all lies. There's no proof of anything. It's all, you know, made up, it's lies, it's just to further their narrative and to, you know, there's so many people that don't really understand what's going on, but we do. You know, we're smarter than that, but then we have to watch in Texas, our Republican representatives pulling this against the best attorney general our state has ever had, who's fighting the Biden administration tooth and nail and doing a very good job, and this is what they pull? Basically taking him out of office for, you know, 5 months, basically stopping all of the work that the office is going on, basically taking him out of job, taking his salary away, besmirching his reputation, putting his family through a terrible ordeal. This is what we have to watch going on in the state of Texas. This is unacceptable. We cannot have this. We can never have this again. I just implore you guys to help us. You've got to tell everybody you know, all your friends and neighbors. It's not the informed voters that I'm concerned about. I think the informed voters can see what's going on, particularly now, and that you will vote to get these guys out of office. But it's the uninformed voters, the ones that don't really know. They're going to go to that ballot box, especially in this primary, being a presidential primary. A lot of people are going to come out, which is a really good thing, because we all want to vote for President Trump. That's what we're going to do. But we need for those uninformed voters not to check that box next to the incumbent because it's a name they know. You know, it's an incumbent, I'm sure he's fine, you know, whatever. If that happens, we're all in a, you know, heap of trouble. This is our time to take Texas and our country back. Where Texas goes, the country goes. So in my estimation, we're fighting good against evil, right against wrong, And I hope that you guys will help us by spreading the word, telling everybody that you know. Let's get all of these rhinos out of office.
Yeah.
Just to kind of put an exclamation point on it, we are 10 representatives short of being able to control the House and what happens. 10 people I have to get elected, beat the incumbent, and the conservatives can take over control of the House again. And I know I put out a newsletter talking about what is a rhino anyway. Nobody in here is a rhino. You may not believe in the full 8 priorities that we have set up. You may not believe in total okay to carry guns or whatever, and that's okay. You're not a rhino, you just simply are wrong thinking. Just kidding. Just kidding. We simply disagree on issues. It's okay to have a disagreement on issues, on the specifics, but once you get elected, now you can make laws. Now you have to stand up for what voters thought they were going to get. And if you're not going to tell us that you're really not all that excited about priority number one, you need to tell us you're not excited about it and tell us why. Otherwise, you're just another lying politician and we don't need any more of it. So that's my 2 cents worth. Now,
amen.
He's still not here, so. Andy, come on down. Andy Hopper. Truthfulness in whatever I'm talking about, that he is one of the 2 candidates running against Rhino Stuckey. And she's not here today. So.
Hey y'all, my name is Andy Hopper. I'm running to be your state representative. Thank you all for showing up today. This is amazing. It's middle day, it's cold as snot outside. I'm really glad y'all are here. So, just, y'all know who I am. I'll be brief. Basically, I live in Wise County. I think that's my phone. So, I do love the Andy Griffith Show. It's the best show that's ever been on television. I grew up in North Carolina, actually, and it was kind of interesting growing up in North Carolina in the 80s, is that Andy Griffith was still primetime television. They would put it right before the news. Believe it or not, because Mount Airy was just, I don't know, it was less than an hour from where I lived. So, anyways, that's why I love Andy Griffith, and that's my ringtone. So, anyways, I'm joined here with my beautiful wife, Amanda. We've been married for 26 years. We've had 3 boys that are grown up to be outstanding men, 23, 21, 17, and our oldest son, Grant, just got married. And so we live in Wise County, but we've actually lived in the district half and half. You know, you may have heard that, you know, this is a Wise County guy, but here's the deal. We lived in Denton County until 2010, 13 years of our marriage in Denton, 13 years of our marriage here. We went to church over at Cross Timbers, just a couple miles from here forever, very, very involved. And half our friends are over here. So here's the deal. It's kind of interesting that God is going to set us up for this, and it's to basically represent this district that is now Wise and Denton. So it's pretty cool to see him working in our lives. And I'm the Chief Warrant Officer in the Texas State Guard. My oldest son, Grant, is a sergeant, and so we get to serve together. And so that's a little bit of our family. I'm a software engineer. I actually I sit in front of a computer and do math, essentially, for a living. So that's kind of my deal, but I'm all, you know, it's been good, and we've learned a lot, and the thing that I've learned is the federal government is unbelievably incompetent. So that's part of my attitude. So let me talk about that for a minute, because I really think that the main challenge that we have, if we look at it from a 30,000-foot perspective, is that Texas is staring down this globalist and Marxist agenda. And we have a lot of folks that are overt Democrats, overt liberals, and we know where they stand. We know they're globalists, probably Marxist. But at this moment in time, the globalists and Marxists are kind of working together. But there's also a lot of folks that are lurking with our own party that I really believe, and I'm not making this accusation of my opponent, but I'm saying many folks that are higher up in the chain of command in the establishment Republican circles, the state and the national level, are obviously open borders. They're obviously for ruining our currency. They're obviously for debt forever. They're Keynesians 100%. They don't believe that money has value. They don't believe it should have value. And these people are okay with basically sitting back, watching it burn, and then moving in and probably making a play to earn themselves some sort of security in the New World Order. And I know that sounds crazy, but we see it play out all the time. If you get an outcome that hope happens over and over and over again, at some point you can't really blame it always on incompetence. There's a degree of malice. And our border is open because people have obviously made deals with the drug cartels. At some level, someone has some economic interest in that happening. When you see the amount of money that is pouring across the border, when you realize that the cartels control the border. You know, there's a really interesting guy that we run Wise County Conservatives. We have speakers every month. There's a guy named Jeffrey Stam who actually speaks about the border, former high up in the DEA, now lives in Wise County. But, you know, to hear him speak and actually understand, I mean, for all practical purposes, there is no government in Mexico. It is the cartels. They have a stranglehold on the government. So when we're sitting there talking about Mexican sovereignty, talking about, you know, the border, who controls the border? The border is controlled by the cartels. And we have to come to terms with the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of kids just in North Texas that are basically being trafficked, raped every single day. And that's happening because the cartels are allowing it, and we're allowing the cartels to do it. At some point, we have to take responsibility for what's going on. And Texas has secured its border for most of its history. The federal government, how many people know the federal government has been incompetent for a very long time? You know, there's lots of reasons for the Civil War, but it's very interesting to read the Texas Declaration of Independence in 1861 because it was unique from all the other southern states. It's a hard read. I mean, it's a complicated work, but it's interesting when you read the opening bit that Texas basically said, you jerks said you were going to protect us from the Indians and the Mexicans, and you did not. And that was 20 years in. And here we are, 188 years later, and we're still dealing with the same thing. I pray to God that we get President Trump back in there in a couple of, few months. But it'll give us a little bit of a respite, right? Because I think that anyone who is looking at the situation in a rational way recognizes that it is going to be a Herculean task, and hopefully God provisions him to be able to reduce the size of the federal government for real. But the reality is there's 2.5 million unelected bureaucrats. They're agencies that operate on their own. It's not even clear to me that the Congress is actually the sole appropriator of money. One of the things I like to talk about with people is that go Google the term $1 trillion coin and recognize that they probably have the ability to self-finance from the executive branch. And they probably don't even need Congress. That's the state we're in. We're here in the state of Texas. Our founders never imagined that we would be in this situation, but they did imagine that if we ever were, that the state legislature should be the ones to stand up to this tyranny. They said in Federalist 26, that the state legislatures should always be suspicious and jealous guardians of the encroachments of the rights of the people against the encroachments of the federal government. And that if anything suspicious arises, that the state legislature should be at all times the voice and the arm of the people. And I don't believe our state legislature is prepared and has their big boy pants on to be the voice and the arm of the people against this. So we need to prepare ourselves. Hopefully we get a 4-year break. Hopefully the border is secure for a bit, because Lord knows something needs to happen. We've had about 15 million people on government numbers come across. I mean, these are federal numbers, so it's probably much higher. Come across in the past 3 years. But just during the 4 sessions of the Texas legislature, just during that interval between January and November, we had 1.2 million people come across just the Texas border. It's staggering. There's only 30 million people in the state. And the goal is to give them suffrage. And so I want to talk about election integrity for a minute, because it's like one of my issues, because I really learned a lot. If you're a close election, you learn a lot about election integrity. You have to. Your donors require it. If you're 80 votes away, then you need to peel back the covers and figure out what's going on. And one of the things I learned is that there is no actual accountability to jurisdictions in Texas to actually satisfy public information requests. People don't know that, but it's a real issue. Public information requests are like the state version of FOIA. And so what ends up happening is that you basically want to learn something about what's going on, so you submit a request in official capacity to a level of government, and then they basically have to answer. And after the election, we did the same thing to Wise and Denton, asked for the same artifacts from the election. And I don't know that anything funny was going on, probably wasn't, but the thing is you expect the counties to answer. And Wise County answered immediately, Denton County said no. And they appealed to the Attorney General. And so they basically ran out the clock. You have a 30-day window to basically get these things answered. If you don't get it within 30 days, you're done. And we sued them. Did a writ of mandamus. They coughed up the information 2 days before the election contest deadline. That's pretty much at the end. So that's interesting because one of the things you know is that election integrity only exists if there's enough transparency for people to answer their questions. The other thing that we've learned as candidates is that there's a lot of doors that don't exist. There's a lot of doors in Republican voter data that did not and never have existed. And so when you actually say, well, what do I do with that? Well, you go report it to the party, and 2 years later, they'll take care of it. That's basically the process. Not gonna get taken care of for this cycle. We know that doesn't exist, but we'll fix it later. So one of the lowest hanging bit of fruits that we could probably ask for as citizens is to say, hey, let's clear voter rolls every once in a while. What do you think about that? Let's just say every 10 years, let's just remove everybody from the voter roll, just re-register. What's one thing that our state legislature is adamantly opposed to? Clearing voter rolls. Every time somebody brings it up, it never gets out of committee. Happens over and over again. And that's one of the things that Attorney General Paxton has been fighting for is election integrity, because anyone who thinks and makes the comments that elections are secure. I mean, when we did the recount in Denton 2 years ago, my opponent basically lambasted me for not believing in elections. But what do you think he did last week? He sent a letter to Wise County essentially telling everyone that he's looking for poll watchers because he's worried that Wise County is going to steal the election. I just think it's hilarious. I don't know what to make of all that. I just think it's really interesting. One shoe, 1 foot, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting deal. So here we are. I mean, here we are in 2024. We're staring down an election that is the most important election in our lifetime. The one thing that everyone cares about door to door is that they want their elections to be secure. General Paxton has been making this point for years, and here we are, nothing's been done. Every single bit of election integrity legislation that was written, much of it by Steve Toth in the Texas House, died in Texas House elections. Much of it was passed in the Senate, died in the House. Gotta ask yourself, why is it Republicans are not 100% committed to securing our elections? Not just clearing voter rolls, but doing simple things like making sure that jurisdictions can answer public information requests, putting positive criminal penalties for people that actually cheat or participate in cover-ups at the local level. Because that's the real issue that you have, is that you find out that there's not enough information. And for people to be confident, to be able to understand that their elections are secure, they need to be able to answer those questions. They also want to believe in the machines. I'm a software engineer. I trust zero programming. I write code for a living, we have no idea what it does. Like, what does your phone do when you tap on it? I don't know, explain it to me. I'm just telling you. Like, the code is actually not available if I went and said, hey, I want to do a public information request and I want to get the code for HART, civic systems. I'm not going to be able to get it. That's a problem. That's a problem because we don't know, no way, it's not opaque, it's an opaque system, it's not transparent. I want a system that any human being can participate in and they can understand how all of the gears and moving parts work. And so I think that the folks that have been calling for a system that is more transparent are making a very good point. And I think that that's something that we need to address. And so those are two issues I think that are really important to address, and General Paxton's here, so I want him to talk more about the border, more about elections and the things that he's done to solve it. But I do want to introduce General Paxton. Actually, Steve, do you want to introduce him? Let me turn it back over to Steve. Thank you all very much for having me.
This has been Andy Hopper, by the way.
So let me introduce the most conservative Attorney General in the entire country. I learned a few things. I was looking at his bio. I mean, first of all, did you know he was student body president at Baylor when he was in bachelor's, and then he actually went to University of Virginia, got his JD, got his law degree at the University of Virginia. He actually was a Texas House member. He was elected in 2002 and served until 2012. So he knows what's going on in the Texas House. He's fully aware of the challenges that we're facing, and he's seen the transformation of the Texas House from basically being one that was controlled by Democrats and then actual Republicans to now reverting to people that identify as Republicans but aren't actually. So he has a horse in this race. He was elected Attorney General in 2014, and one of the things I learned from Michelle a couple years, or actually about a year ago, when this entire snafu began, is I did not know that there were 4,000 employees at the Attorney General's department. Did you know that? Like, when you sit there and talk about whistleblowers and you're thinking, oh man, there's probably only 15 people that work there. There's 4,000 people in that entire organization with 38 divisions and 117 offices. So this is a massive organization that he is orchestrating and keeping moving forward. One of the things that has been very, very interesting and clear to every American is that there's only one Attorney General, in my opinion, that has been consistently and ardently fighting for the Constitution and fighting for the original intent, not just case law, but fighting for what the founders and our framers actually intended when they wrote these words and penned them. And in that process, he sued the federal government 27 times. But what's cool is that 6 of them have gone to the Supreme Court, and 75% of all the cases in all those federal lawsuits have actually prevailed, and because Ken Paxton is awesome. So, anyways, I want to read you a few words. By the way, this goes without saying, this is a man that's endorsed by President Trump. So I think that should tell us everything we need to know. Before I introduce him, let me read this little bit. If I don't have my glasses on, but I'm going to do my best. This was actually on January 17th, there was a letter that was written by Attorney General to the General Counsel at Homeland Security. And the words, it just gave me chills when I read it. So I'm pulling from different pieces of this, but I just think this is just really awesome, and it shows you everything you need to know about the fact that Texas is willing to stand up. Because the facts and the law side with Texas, the state will continue utilizing its constitutional authority to defend her territory. And I will continue defending these lawful efforts in court. Rather than addressing Texas's largest request for protection, President Biden has authorized DHS to send threatening letters to its lawyers, via its lawyers. But Texas has lawyers too, and I will continue to stand up for the state's constitutional powers and its self-defense. And I just think that tells you everything you need to know about the fact that this guy is completely committed to standing up for Texas, standing up for what our Texas founders imagined, what they created and to shed their blood for. And I'm so proud to introduce Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Thank you. Such good memories of being here. I ran my first race for Attorney General. I came here to Robson Ranch and got amazing support. So the reason I've gotten to do all this stuff is because you all supported me in my very first race, which that's really the first race is when people don't really know what you're going to do. And you have to tell them, I'm going to do this, but so many politicians, as you know, say they'll do something and then they don't do it. And I remember running against my opponent, Dan Branch. We'd been in the House together for 10 years and I went to the Senate. So we had a similar, exact same time period, and he was claiming to be running basically on my record. And I said, why don't you all compare the records instead of the rhetoric? Don't listen to the rhetoric, listen to the record. And pretty much that's where we are still today. Look at the record, not the rhetoric. For those of you who don't know, this is this summer I got impeached. I didn't know if you all knew that. I guess maybe you did. I want to tell a little bit of that story. It was shocking because I'd just been reelected in my 3rd term. You all voted overwhelmingly to put me back here. And it's your prerogative to do that or not do that. And not only did I win the primary, beating a guy, I think you've heard of him, George P. Bush, 68-32, which is my largest win ever. But then I also overwhelmingly won the general election, despite all the people that ran in the primary saying I could never win a general election. They've said that. I've won 17 races. They keep saying I can't win, and yet you all vote for me. So after 4.5 months of being in office, the politicians decided that they had had enough. They couldn't beat me in an election where they spent, I don't know, 30 million, 25 million, a lot of money. They made me spend 16 million. So they also knew I didn't have any money left to go out and hire lawyers. So, and you can't raise money during session, so I'd spent, between the primary, the runoff, and the general, I spent all my money. I had no money left. As a matter of fact, I owed money. And they knew that. They knew I had nothing. And of course, they had unlimited dollars from some people, well, from you guys, from taxpayers. They took your money to do this. And they didn't want you to know anything about it. They didn't tell you about it, did they? I mean, no one told me. They didn't let you participate. They didn't want you to know what they were doing. And I know why, because I have a friend who's in the Texas House, Nate Schatzline, and he told the story. They called him and Brian Harrison in and Steve Toth, and they were trying to force them to vote for an impeachment with no evidence. And he said, well, is there just since we don't have any evidence, I don't even know who the witnesses are, I don't think, you haven't sworn anybody in, they don't have to tell the truth, whoever they are. Can we spend some time like other impeachments and find out what actually happened? And they said, well, we can't let that happen. He said, what do you mean you can't let that happen? He said, well, if we give more than 48 hours, then he'll get off. We don't want people to have the time to look at all this stuff. We just got to do it real quick. And he said, well, I think you've answered my question. I'm not doing this. And they all walked out. But that was the strategy. Do it really quick. They spent 4 months investigating without telling anybody, and they didn't want the material to come out. They didn't swear anybody in, so no one was committed to whatever they said. They could always change it later if they needed to. That's partly why they did it. They didn't want you to know what they said, but they also didn't want to be committed to any particular story. It's a lot easier to convict somebody if you can change your story several times, right? And that was what they were trying to do. So, and there's a reason I'm telling this story, and it's actually going to get back to a point of why we need to change the Texas House. And so, I'm sitting there, they do this in 3 days. I didn't know. I didn't know until they announced that they were going to have a hearing the next day, which lasted 3 hours. Their entire hearing on me lasted 3 hours. I sent one of my lawyers to give them our report, give other information to be able to basically challenge the assertions being made. They were very general and broad. And again, we didn't know who was saying it. It was all hidden. And we were not allowed to do that. We were not allowed to participate, to give anything. They didn't want anything in the record that would challenge their very broad assertions. And the idea here was throw as many things at them as possible. Very general, and we'll try to make at least one of them stick, because all they need is one. And the fact that you voted for me doesn't matter to them. The politicians know better. You guys made a mistake. Did you know that? That was their assertion. You had messed up. And the law actually said not only do they have to swear witnesses in, but they also had to follow this law. It's very simple. If the allegations occurred prior to the impeachment, then they can't remove you. Why is that? Because as long as the voters knew about it, the courts have said it's up to you to decide, not the politicians. The politicians said no. Both in the House and the Senate, they ignored this law, by the way. Both houses ignored this law. The politicians said, no, we know better, we're going to decide this. Forget border security, forget election integrity, forget all these issues that the Senate passed. We don't have time for those. We're going to impeach you. And you remember the narrative? The narrative was, well, it must be true all these Republicans are doing it. There's 60 Republicans that voted for impeachment. So it must be true, right? Don't you believe that if the Republicans did it, it must be true that there's something here. Well, I'm going to tell you from having been in the House, and this is why somebody like Andy Hopper is so important. This is why I'm spending my time, why I'm going to be doing this all day, and why I'm doing it every day. By the way, I spent, about a week ago, I was in this district in Beaumont for a guy named David Covey's running against Dave Phelan. I spent a very cold day down there, and I think he's doing very well, actually. I think he's got a very good chance of unseating the speaker. Let me tell you how it works, and you probably know this, and it took me a long time to figure this out, well, a few years. You get down to a place like the Texas House, and the leadership wants to control your vote. Doesn't matter who it is, Democrat, Republican, they want you to vote the way they want you to vote. They don't want you to come back and ask your constituents. And so I had to deal with this very early in my career, my second term. They wanted me to vote for this payroll tax, and this was coming from the Republicans. This was Governor Perry and some of the other leadership decided we needed a big business tax, taxing every employee in the state. Now that would create a disincentive for people to be hired. It would mean a lot less employment, a lot less jobs in Texas. So I thought it was a really stupid, bad plan. But I'm new. I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just don't know any better. So, I'm getting all this pressure. And by the way, I'm the deciding vote on the committee. It's Ways and Means. I'm brand new. I've got 4 Republicans who are all chairman of big committees, calendars and education, and chairman of the Committee of Ways and Means. And then there's 4 Democrats. The Democrats are voting no. Not because they don't like it, They want to be able to blame the Republicans for a very bad idea. And so I go back to my district and I start talking to people. I don't give them my opinion. I say, what do you think about a payroll tax? I go to 25 different people that I respect, and the vote was 25-0 against that idea. So I go back and I tell the speaker and I tell everybody else, I'm not voting for this. This is not what my district wants. And they're like, well, look, you don't need to be listening to them. You know, we know better. And I'm like, I don't even care. I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You don't want me to listen to the very people. I said, it wasn't like split. I mean, I didn't have like a 12-13 vote here. This was 25-0. It's not a close call. So I'm not doing this. And I took a lot of heat. I ultimately forced them to pass my bill out. And I got it to the floor, and they tried to change it on the floor, and I beat them on the floor, and we ended up passing it. But, you know, the speaker controls everything, so when we got to conference committee, I wasn't on the conference committee for my own bill. Only the people that voted against my bill were on the conference committee, so that's a very bad sign. And they killed the bill. And so then what happened? Governor Perry calls us back. They take me off the committee, and they pass their franchise tax. They passed another very bad tax that no one's ever bragged about, that I told them was a bad idea. They did it anyway, and Governor Perry signed it. So that's what happens in Austin. And Dade Phelan is no different. And they figured out it's gotten worse. That was the good old days, when we still got good stuff done. It's gotten much worse, and here's why. Because about 15 years ago, the Democrats figured out they were not the majority, but they wanted to rule. And they figured out, well, if we just block vote, those Republicans over there, they're not smart enough to block vote. They're not smart enough to decide who they want. We can control this. And sure enough, for about 15 years they've done it. And here's what they do. There's 150 House members. By the way, we have 31 senators. Does anybody know why we have 150 House members and 31 senators? I mean, I made this up. It's probably not true. But I just wondered that one day, and I actually talked about this. No one's ever challenged this, so I don't know if it's actually true. This is extra credit stuff, by the way. It's not. So I think it's because there's 150 Psalms and 31 Proverbs. I mean, there's no other state that has those numbers. It's weird that it's 31 and 150. It doesn't even divide into it equally. It's a weird number. So no one's ever disputed that. So right now, that's the truth. And that's your extra credit for the day. Anyway, off track. So what happens is there's 65 Democrats, and they align together, and they go to the Republicans that want to be speaker, and they say, "What are you going to give us? Who will give us the most?" And so whoever that is, Dade Phelan, he gets their vote. And so he needs 76 votes. How's he going to do it? Well, he goes and he talks to Greg Bonin, and he says, "Dr. Bonin, would you like to be chair of appropriations, the most powerful committee?" "Sure." "Oh, I got his vote." "Hey, Dustin Burrows, would you like to be chair of calendars that controls everything that comes on the floor?" "Oh, that sounds great. I'll vote for you." You see what happens? All he needs is 10. He's got his own vote. Done deal. They've done it for 15 years. And we keep falling for the same thing because guess what? The media, I'm shocked, they don't cover this. They don't tell you the story. And so you don't know. And guess what? Your state representative, whatever his name is, doesn't come back and tell you, "Oh, by the way, I just kind of do what the Democrats want because I want to keep my own chairmanship and I want to keep my own, they raise money for me now. I don't need your money. I don't need you." If you just don't know what I'm doing, you don't know what I'm doing in impeachment, you don't know that I'm actually supporting Democratic chairs, you don't know that I'm stopping election integrity fixes, that we're not doing anything about the border, you don't know. Because guess what? The media doesn't tell the truth. They don't let you know. And your own state rep comes back and tells you all the great things that he did, but he fails to tell you all the things that he didn't do, which is a long list of things that should have been done that aren't done and are causing our state to fall behind, and we may never be able to fix it if we can't fix the Texas House. So that's how they do it. And how did they do this impeachment to me? So it was easy. And you're going to say, well, how do you know this? Well, so here's what they did. I think Joe Biden and his team, not Joe, we all know Joe doesn't know what's going on. Whoever is telling him what to do, called the Texas Democrats, said, "We want Paxton out. He sued us. He sued us in 2.5 years. I think he sued us 49 times. We keep losing. We don't like him. Can you get rid of him?" We were supposed to lose his election when all the Republicans, the Bush team, tried to take him out. Karl Rove did everything he could to spend millions of dollars in Texas for Lawsuit Reform, which funds all the bad guys. It was supposedly a Republican group. Texas for Lawsuit Reform. Have you guys ever heard of Dick Weekly and Dick Wilson? Dick Weekly Homes. Don't buy any more Weekly Homes because this guy is corrupt, and he's the guy raising all the money from all the wealthy billionaires to fund Dade Phelan. That's why they don't need your money. We used to go raise it in our districts from our people because we needed their vote and their support. Now, they don't come ask you for money, not much. They don't need to. They have Texans for Law, so they've got Dick Weekly funding their little races and Dick Travolsi. So anyway, they all decided that they were going to take me out in this election. That didn't work. And then they all participated with the Biden administration. How do I know the Biden administration was a part of this? Well, the House Investigating Committee, there's 5 members. I used to be on it. And they decided, instead of investigating this Democrat who had largely put her staff to work for personal reasons, they came after me. And why? And the House Investigating Committee had 4 lawyers that they hired to help. In other words, there's 3 Republicans on the committee, 2 Democrats. One of the Republicans didn't even know that it was about me. They didn't even tell him until the day of. And he had been carrying my bills and told me I was the greatest Attorney General in Texas history and the greatest Attorney General in the country. Why would that guy now vote to impeach me? And he did, by the way, on the committee and then directly. His name is David Spiller. He's not far from here. Why did he vote to do that? Because they threatened him. They told him, and I know this from one of his clients, because he was like, why did you do this? He said, well, they told me I had to, because if I didn't, they would kick me out, they wouldn't give me the money. And so I decided to trade Ken Paxton to keep my job. That's what he did. That's what David Spiller did. Probably a great guy, but not strong, right? Willing to trade. Willing to trade what was right for what was wrong to protect himself, and that's exactly what David Spiller did. Well, so the Biden administration randomly sends 2 lawyers from the Department of Justice to help the House Investigating Committee. So here's a Republican-run House, and they just randomly, coincidentally, have 2 lawyers from the Department of Justice from the Biden administration. I'm sure that was an accident, right? I'm sure. Just random, I mean, sure. I don't know if you all saw some of the impeachment trial where my attorney said there are no coincidences in Austin. You got that from me. That was my one good line. So I know that the Biden administration was a part of this. Why would and you get the House Speaker a Republican. Why would that happen? It's because of the allegiance I just told you about. This is what we've been putting up with. And so I'm here to tell you today, despite the pain of being kicked out in 3 days, no salary, Glenn Hager, the comptroller, cuts off my salary illegally just to be part of the team of people in the House. Glenn Hager, who's our comptroller, elected by you, decides to cut my salary off illegally. You know why you can get away with it? Because he knows I'd have to sue him in Austin. You know how many cases I won in Austin? None. Because we've got a bunch of liberal judges there. That's why we settled the supposed whistleblower case. We settled it because we were in Austin. Not because we were wrong. Not because we were wrong in the law. We just knew we were going to spend millions of dollars. It was going to be going on for years, and there was no chance of winning in Austin. So what do? Settle. So we settled. So anyway, I'm out of office. I have no money. I've got no salary. I've got no lawyers, and I've got to build this team really fast. The Senate puts a gag order on me. The Lieutenant Governor says I can't talk now. So then the House is leaking information. Nothing happens to them. They don't directly say it. They leak to the media. I know you're going to be shocked, but the media doesn't like me. And they made up all these stories, and every day there was a new bad story about me. And guess what? I was not allowed, under my First Amendment rights, to speak. Gag order. By the Republicans. So then I watch I'm sitting out there putting together this team, and I watch the Rules Committee in the Senate get put together. And it's bad. I already know, because, and everybody's saying, well, you know, you got a Republican Senate, everybody's going to be fine. You know, the Lieutenant Governor loves you, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? The first thing I knew I had trouble, this state law that says you can't remove somebody for things that have prior to the election, which meant that automatically 19 of the 20 things should have been gone, and just the settlement should have been issued, which there's no way I'd lose on the settlement. I didn't even settle the case, my team does, and that's their job, to settle cases. We settle a lot of cases. And yet, that law was set aside in the Senate and the House. And the law about sworn testimony, the Senate brought in all these people that never were sworn in and let them come in. Now, they got sworn in the Senate, but remember, they could hold their story and change it as we went along during the trial. It allowed them a lot of flexibility with their stories, because when we would nail somebody, they could change, the next guy could be ready for that. But if they'd been nailed down to the truth. So there's a reason we have these laws. The law can be a sword or shield. If you haven't broken the law, you actually have done nothing wrong. It's a shield. If you have done something wrong, it becomes a sword. They took away the shield from me, both in the House and the Senate. And so I'm sitting on the sidelines going, This is not looking very good. Because not only do I have 31 senators who they first illegally, the Republicans, got rid of my wife, Angela, who was a senator, told her she couldn't vote, even though she's elected like everybody else. They got rid of one vote. And I knew they were whittling away, because all they needed to do was get one of these 20 vague charges and all kind of come together. They already had 12 votes from the Democrats, automatic. And they came out and said, three of them came out and said I was guilty before they ever heard anything. And I asked that they be recused. I asked the Lieutenant Governor to recuse them, and he said, no, you're going to recuse Angela, but not them. I said, fine, okay. So I have to deal with these Democrats that have already made up their mind. They're already biased. And they're supposed to be impartial. That's what the Constitution says. But yet, they were allowed to stay. So I already got 12 votes against me, and you think, well, you've got 18 Republicans. They have to get 2/3. There's 3 Republicans that are lawyers that want my job. And they worked behind the scenes. They did everything they could to accumulate other votes. So now I've got Republicans who are on the Rules Committee, by the way. One of them particularly was on the Rules Committee, making sure that the rules were not favorable to me. So here I am, looking at a pretty hopeless situation. I got no money, I got no lawyers, I got kicked out, I have no staff, I have no media, it's all negative. I've got the Senate bad rule committee, and they're not following any state laws. How would you feel? It didn't look good. So why am I here? I think there's 2 reasons. First of all, around the country, I would say, and I believe this, 100,000 people were praying for me. And 2, you guys spoke up. They created this myth, this fiction, where they said, oh, we're jurors, you can't talk to us. They're not jurors. They're elected senators and representatives responsible to you, the voter. There's nothing they shouldn't talk to you about. There's nothing they shouldn't listen to you about. Well, so they decided they wouldn't talk to you, but the great thing is you decided you were going to talk to them anyway. And that's what made the difference. They heard it because they had to, because you wouldn't shut up. And it was the people of Texas that kept me in this job. You elected me, and then you spoke out on the impeachment, and the whole thing backfired on them because their witnesses all became our witnesses as they fell apart under cross-examination. And remember, there were 10 days of trial. I only had 1 day to present my witnesses because we had to deal with, instead of proving, usually they have to prove that you're guilty, I had to prove that I was innocent. That's where I was at. I had to prove that I had to prove that I didn't take a bribe because they'd set it for 3 years, they made it up, they said it over and over so that everybody believed that I took a bribe. But the problem with the bribe is you actually have to, in the end, I could show I paid for things and that nothing ever came into my account. Because I guarantee you, I've been investigated the entire time I've been in office by the federal government and by local people. So they have every piece of information, and if I had ever done anything wrong, I guarantee you, I would not be standing here in front of you. And they don't quit, by the way. They never stop. You can see what they're doing to Trump. It's no different with me. So there's a story I was just reading today about Joseph in the Bible, and where his brothers basically were going to kill him. And then they just said, no, I guess one of the brothers, Reuben, said, don't do that. Let's just sell him in this, let's just throw him in this pit. Well, he was gone for a little while, and they just sold him into slavery, hoping he'd be dead. And then, you know the end of the story. Their brothers are standing in front of him and saying, what you meant for evil, or he's saying to them, just saying that what you meant for evil, God meant for good, because now I can save Israel. And I think that's what this is all about. I think that this experience that I've had, while it was very unpleasant for me in a very bad summer, very difficult summer, I think that the fact that it was so public, you all got to see what actually happens with the Texas House and how bad it is. And this is our opportunity, because we do not fix this. We do not elect people like Andy Humphrey. We are going to lose the state of Texas. And there's another piece to this that is super important. It's just as important as the House. And that is a group of people that I have very little respect for at this point. It's the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. How many of y'all can honestly say you know what they do? Raise your hand. It's not a big crowd of people saying yes, they know what they do. And the reason is, no one knows what they do, really. The only people that really pay attention are the district attorneys and the criminal defense attorneys. And they tend to be democratically aligned. So I'm going to tell you what George Soros did in this state, and it's genius. There was a 3-part strategy, and he really outsmarted us. He went around to all the big counties that all are democratically controlled, where we don't even have a chance of winning. and he switched out the DAs. I used to work with a lot of pretty good Democratic DAs that would do their jobs and prosecute. In Austin, in Bexar County, which is San Antonio, Dallas. He went and switched them all out. He wanted people that wouldn't prosecute, to create havoc, hates law enforcement. Some of these places got rid of their police department, so the crime's gone way up. That was frustrating. And, by the way, they wouldn't prosecute voter fraud. Well, I was still prosecuting voter fraud. I know, there's no voter fraud. Remember, the media tells you there's no voter fraud. Where is it? I had over 900 counts going, either investigating or we were already prosecuting. We prosecuted people. So when I got there to the office, when I started, there was only one person doing it. We didn't have any funding from the legislature to do it. That's why you didn't hear much about it. Most states don't prosecute voter fraud. They just let it go. So I asked for resources, and I got 3 more. We had 4 people, and we were busy. They'd given us 8, they would have been busy. So don't believe this thing that there's no voter fraud. Second, during the last election that Trump lost, we were being overwhelmed. We had 12 cases all at the same time, which is not a coincidence. And they were all doing the same things, COVID related. And these judges in all these liberal counties like Travis were saying, hey, you know, the legislature, they put in requirements for mail-in ballots. You can only vote if you're over 60, you're disabled, you're out of town, or you're in jail, but you're not a felon. We don't follow laws here, not in Travis County. That's just wrong. Those guys, they don't know what they're talking about. It's COVID time. Mail them to everybody. Well, so when you actually request a mail-in ballot, the way it works, it's not nearly as good as showing up with a photo ID. It's not nearly as secure. And I don't even like mail-in ballots for the reasons that the legislature is giving, because I don't think it's secure. But at least you have to mail in an application, you sign it. They mail you back a ballot with an envelope, you fill out your ballot, stick it in an envelope, you sign it. When you mail it in, they compare your signatures. If they match, they pull the ballot out, they destroy the envelope so no one knows who voted for who, and they at least have some check. Well, if you mail out, if Harris County mails out 2.7 million ballots to everyone, which was being ordered, or Travis County mails out, 1.7 million, we're talking 8 million ballots that are going out to people we don't even know who they are, and when they mail them in, we have no idea who filled them out, who signed them. You remember the story. You can't prove there was voter fraud in all these mail-in ballots, and you know what? They're right, because of the way they did it. There's no way to prove it. So Georgia, by the way, so we're in this fight. I have to win 12 lawsuits in bad counties where the judges are all ruling against us, and then I get to the Court of Appeals, they're all Democrats. So I'm in Travis County, I can't get past them. They won't rule on our case. They're waiting for all these ballots to go out so that it's too late, and I can't do anything about it once they're mailed out. It's too late. The genie's out of the bottle. So I told my team, I said, look, we have to win every single case or we're going to lose Texas. And so I need you to figure out some way around these courts that are delaying these cases. You have to get to the Supreme Court. You have to get to the Fifth Circuit. And hopefully these guys are smart enough to understand that if these ballots go out, they're out too. They're going to get voted out. Sure enough, we found a way that had never been done before, and we won all 12 cases. And I remember calling Trump in May, and I said, Mr. President, I need to tell you something. There's a decent chance you're going to lose Texas. He goes, there's no way that's true. I said, no. I said, I'm involved. I said, I've never seen anything like this. This is a funded effort by somebody. I think it was Soros. And I said, we have 12 cases. I said, this is a massive resource strain for us, and I'm in a very bad position because I'm in bad counties where I'm losing every case. And I've got bad courts of appeals where I'm losing every time where they're just not ruling. I said, if I don't win every single one of these, if they send out, just Harris County alone sends out 2.7 million ballots, you won by 620,000 votes last time. They're going to count, they're going to figure out how many votes they need, and they're going to have enough votes to beat you. And I said, why? The reason I'm telling you this is not to say, oh, you should be worried about Texas. You should be. I'm telling you this because I'm pretty sure if this is happening in Texas, it's happening other places. And my belief right now is you're going to get beat by mail-in ballots. And you're not going to have any idea. If they get them out, you're done. Because they will just count them until they figure out how many they need. So sure enough, we win all 12 cases. I'm sitting there election night with some friends from my office, watching the results come in. And for the first time in my life, they can't count the votes that night. I mean, they could in California, Oregon, and Washington at 7 o'clock. Biden won those. They didn't have to count until 3 days. But all the battleground states that Trump was ahead in, they had to stop and count ballots. I knew that night, I went to bed knowing what exactly was going to happen. Trump was going to just barely lose every one of those states. And they would count as many mail-in ballots as they needed that came from who knows who in violation of all of their state laws. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why this Court of Criminal Appeals battle, and why the House, if we don't fix it, I'm going to tell you the last things I'm going to talk about. Court of Criminal Appeals, we have 3 people running against them. Nobody knows who they are, and I'm going to actually ask. And you are some of the most educated voters in Texas, some of the most educated Republicans. It's 9 members on the Court of Criminal Appeals. They're all Republicans. One guy voted the right way. I'll tell you who he is, Kevin Urey. Hero. The other 8 all voted to strike down a statute that was passed in 1951 that directed me from the legislature to prosecute voter fraud. They came in 2 years ago, right after the filing deadline, so no one could run against them 2 years ago. 2 days later, they strike down that statute so that I could no longer prosecute voter fraud. And you know what their argument was? They said that because I'm in the executive branch, because of the separation of powers, constitutional argument, that I'm not allowed to go to court for anything. So if they're right, the Texas Supreme Court should tell me right now, I know you have 38,000 cases, you're defending Texas, you're not allowed. And guess what? This has been happening for 71 years. Actually, the AG's been in court since the beginning of having an AG in Texas. This is the first time the Court of Criminal Appeals has gone against their own precedent, and they've decided that everybody was wrong from the beginning of time, including every state in the country has been wrong, including the founders were wrong. Thank God that our Court of Criminal Appeals is smarter than all those people, and they figured this out. And they got me out of the business of defending the state. Now, even as most of you are non-lawyers, I hope that doesn't make any sense at all. It was the most ludicrous, far-fetched argument, and that's the one they used to get rid of me from prosecuting voter fraud. And you would say, well, why would these Republicans, this is back to the narrative, these are all Republicans, right? They're all good. Okay, do you guys know who they are? Let me just do a quiz. And you are some of the most educated voters in Texas. I do this everywhere. And the most I've ever gotten of the thousands of people that I've asked, of the most educated Republicans about Republican judges who are at the very highest level. They are the highest court for criminal matters. We actually have a bifurcated system, so the Texas Supreme Court is the final say in civil, and they're on criminal, Court of Criminal Appeals. How many of you, if you can name all 9, raise your hand. People elected to positions that are so-called Republicans, if George Soros wanted people there to take down the ability to ever prosecute voter fraud, he did it with the DAs, he did it with the Court of Criminal Appeals, and then he came after me. If he gets me, it's done. We're going to lose Texas. And that's why right now we're at a crossroads. We either fix this now or we're going to lose Texas. Because if we can't stop voter fraud, everything else that we care about, you may care about 1,000 other issues, today's Sanctity of Life Day, won't matter, they'll change it. Everything that, election integrity, if we don't have election integrity, we lose everything, border, everything. And so, if we can't elect new members of the Court of Criminal Appeals, this is our chance, and new members of the House, and I asked the House, by the way, to fix this. I asked the Senate to fix this. The Senate passed a bill reauthorizing me to prosecute voter fraud. The House, whenever the Elections Committee sat there, I called the Speaker, as usual, he didn't return my phone calls. He never returns any phone calls that I've ever made over there. He won't meet with me, by the way, and he hasn't met with me for the entire time he's been there. Unless I walk over there and catch him on the floor, it's the only way, and then they kicked me off the last time I was over there, even though I had privileges as a former House member. He had the Sergeant of Arms kick me out of there. And all I was trying to do was talk to him. Anyway, I asked them to pass it, and they said they didn't have time. You know why? They're too busy impeaching me. And so instead of protecting our state, they said, no, we don't care about your state. We aren't going to pass any of that. And so we have to fix the Texas House. We have to get people like Amy Harper elected. And we have to elect a new Court of Criminal Appeals. And I'm going to give you the names, and I want you to write these down because no one's going to know the other people. And if you guys will spread the word and get your vote out, and your friends to vote for these 3 people, we can fix that, and we can get the House changed. Because we got to fix both. And if I'm convinced that it'll be 4 to 6 years before we lose the state. We won't get it back. So, Sheena Parker, Lee Finley, and David Schenck. David Shank. Gina Parker, Lee Finley, and David Shank. I need you to spread the word because none of these people have any money, but as I just showed, nobody knows who's running on the other side either, even those people have been there for 20 years. Nobody knows who they are. So we have to win this race. We can win this race. All we have to do is work, just a little bit, and we can save the state, and we can elect people like Andy Hopper because that's the other key. If I can't get him elected and other people like him, then we can't fix this. So, it takes a lot of courage running as an incumbent, knowing that they have all this money, knowing that they have this powerhouse of corporate interests that are going to get behind them with finances. So I'm going to ask you to do two things for him. One is be as generous as you can be. There's no time like now to be generous because we have to win this. Second, I'm going to ask you to do something that's going to, it's not hard. It'll take some effort. You've got a couple of months to get this done. I want everybody in this room, and if you do this, I think you'll win. This is how I win. It's very non-complicated. This is the way I think, non-complicated. Everybody in this room gets 20 couples to vote for him. Collects their name, address, and phone number, and then keep calling them. And guess what? They'll vote for him. You know why? Because they trust you. They may not know him. He can't know everybody. And that's the problem with the state rep race. Most people are not going to know him, but they trust you. And they should trust you. And if you get that, that's 40 votes. Everyone in this room gets 40 votes, he'll win. It's all up to you. And so I'm on the road every day, almost, doing this because I think it's that important. I'm not out here campaigning for myself. I'm not out raising money for myself. I'm fighting for him, and I'm fighting for the Court of Criminal Appeals because I'm convinced that if we don't fix it now, we're not just going to lose Texas. If Texas goes down, we lose the country. So thank you all very much for having me, and please support this guy at every time. Criminal Appeals about what they're doing in the Texas House. We get the votes. We just got to get them out. And so we got to be generous in helping people like Andy Hopper, but we have to be generous with our finances and our time. And it's worth it because if we lose it, you're not going to get to keep anything anyway. We're moving in a very bad direction. And if it becomes a one-party country, which is what they want it set up so that we only have one party, and it's going to be no different than being in China or Venezuela. That's what they want. The elite want that. But you and me can stop it if we put the effort in, if we care.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned get the next 40. Can you give us next steps on so that we can go out and be effective to get the next 40 apiece? The 40, you said get 40 apiece.
Yeah, so you're talking, I'm asking you basically to find your 20 friends, people that know you, that respect you, and call them and say, hey, I need you to vote for Andy Hopper. Would you be willing to give me your contact information so that he can stay in touch with you? He can remind you to vote through either email, through text messaging, or through sending mail. And then, as the election gets close, we get into early voting, start calling them, say, hey, have you and your spouse and your kids gone and voted for him? Because you got to stay on it. Because they'll just like, oh, whatever, I don't have time to do that. Yeah, it is. It's just, they don't know him, they don't know the other guy, and they get lazy. They don't think it's important, but you know it's important. So, he's out, like, giving up his life for this. You all should give up some time and just stay on those 20 people, because that turns into 40 votes. It's very hard for the other side to overcome that many votes they're not counting on, that just gratuitously, randomly come in. That's how I won my race. I literally documented, I expanded it to, probably had 250 people doing that. And almost every one of those people showed up to vote. I got a really high percentage. That was my highest, of all the lists I had, of all the Republican list, pro-life list, that list was my best list. It was the highest turnout for me of any list because my people, I stayed on them and they stayed on their friends. And it was, they never saw it coming.
We'll stay close.
Hi, how close are we to paper ballots when they're voting and counting?
So I think that's really up to the legislature, which, you know, the current legislature, at least in the House, I think the Senate would do it. The House doesn't care. They're not on our side. That's why we got to get him elected. I don't have any control over that. All I can do is go prosecute voter fraud if I'm allowed to. But it's guys like Andy, if you elect him, Your current guy's not going to do that. He's bought and paid for it. He's not going to ever make that happen. He'll talk about it, but he'll never do it because he's not there to serve you. He's there to serve Dave Phelan.
Just as a comment on how do you let your neighbors and friends know, put a sign in your yard, because there's a lot of people here who have never voted in Texas
I think
before.
he has a few back there. Look, look what popped up.
Take a sign home and put it in your
Yeah,
yard.
that's also a great way. But it's not as good as calling them and saying,
true,
please.
true. But I was going to ask you about advertising thing from a rhino that has our governor's picture with this person. And I've really given a lot of credit to our governor for his work on the border. So how do we feel about him if
Well,
he's...
Look, so I'm in an awkward position because he's my client. So I represent a lot of these people, and I actually represent Dave Phelan. I pretty much don't criticize my clients until they do what Dave Phelan does, which is 100% betray you. I don't expect perfection from all my clients, and I would, you know, I have agreed with Abbott on some of these people, but he's also supported some, I think, rhinos, Dave Phelan lovers, and that's part of the problem. So I would absolutely disagree with some of his endorsements, but he's also endorsed some good people. I feel like we have a bigger cause than just, he's focused on one thing, school choice, because that's the issue that has become his issue. But it should be bigger than that. And Dave Phelan, I mean, if I'm the governor, Dave Phelan's the one that killed school choice, and yet, if I'm endorsing against Dave Phelan. That hasn't happened. That's really his problem. It's Dave Phelan. Going after all these other people is a symptom of Dave Phelan's leadership.
Yes, sir.
The border doesn't matter if we can't fix this stuff, because we won't be able to fix it.
Yes, sir. I was looking through X this morning, and I came across an interesting thread that talked about Trump's next pick for Attorney General, and your name was on that list. What truth to that rumor?
So I am not seeking that. I'm just literally, I have so many fights going on with this stuff right now. I've got this judge in Austin that, you know, she's trying to order my entire staff to basically dedicate their entire time to the settlement that's already been settled. It's a mess. So we're gonna be in that fight. I've got my own trial coming up. After 9 years, they sent me to a different county, Harris. Why did they send me there? Democratic judges, Democratic jury. So they're gonna try to put me in jail just like they're trying to put Trump in jail. So I've got a lot of fights before I get there. I just want you to know, I mean, I am not gonna back down. They can put me in jail for not doing anything wrong, just like they're trying to do to Trump. But that's how they weaponize this. It makes no sense that I'm being tried after 9 years of sitting here waiting, and they blame it on me. I've done nothing to slow it down. I've asked for a trial. I've asked for a speedy trial. It's required by the Constitution, and I haven't gotten it. But they don't care about the Constitution. They have no basis for having me in Harris County. They made it up, and they set me up with Democratic prosecutors. They're not real prosecutors. They want to make a couple $1 million. They've been incentivized. They're being paid to go after me. That's not what's supposed to happen in the legal system. They're supposed to get a government salary so they're not financially incentivized to put you in jail. They set this up to financially incentivize 2 Democrats from Houston. Why am I in Houston? Because it's much easier in a Democratic county to convict somebody of something that's just political. And that's how they operate. So I'm a long way from worrying about that, just like Trump's a long way from worrying about his. He's got four different jurisdictions that are not good, and they've got like 71 counts of criminal activity on him. Same modus operandi, just made up, put him in a bad place where the jury pool is bad and the judges are bad. That's what they do to us now. So get ready. They're coming after me again. And it's the same people. It's the Karl Roves of the world, the Bush team, it's the Biden team, it's the TLRs, it's the same group, and it's these guys that were put in my office to try to take me out.
Hi, Mr. Paxton. We just absolutely thank God for you. We were part of the groups that were involved in making the calls during your impeachment and
Thank you.
hoax and all that.
That's why I'm here.
One of the things that I have to say is just the folks, grassroots, that just is stunning, is when we see people like you, and you see the obvious illegal things that's going on, and in our minds, we think like, well, they can't do that to him. There'll be people that will, apply the law. And that's not what we see happening, and it's just, it's so unsettling in a way to be able to see, like what you pointed out multiple times, and this was illegal, and this was illegal, and this was illegal. And I wonder about, and all the folks that voted against you, can you talk to that at all?
Yeah,
it just makes no sense.
Well, so I explained the people that voted against me was Dade Phelan making this about, he told them it was a speaker vote. As a matter of fact, when John Smithy, I don't know if anybody saw John Smithy speak, he's a lawyer, and he got up and said, this is insane. You have no evidence, nobody was sworn in, there was no due process, there's no way that we could do this. He was turning Republican votes. And the speaker sent Morgan Meyer, Craig Goldman, who's running for Congress, went out and said, they walked around and said, you cannot change your vote. This is a speaker vote. You will not be here. You have to do this. Due process doesn't matter. Vote to impeach. And that's how they got it done. That's how, it's the iron fist. And this lawfare stuff, they send you to Travis County or Harris County, and these judges could care less about the law. They don't follow laws. I have an attorney who I've had for 9 years. We've been through multiple judges, multiple jurisdictions, all this. You're in bad counties. They elect Democrats who don't care about the law, and that's where they then send you for your cases. Look at Trump. He's in New York. So these judges, and then the media piles on. They don't tell you the truth. They say, "Oh, look, he got convicted. He got, you know." That's what they do. They lie about. The media lies, and these judges don't follow any law. So, in 9 years, I've had the same attorney. He said, I have been practicing, and he was in my impeachment too. He said, I've been practicing for 42 years. I have never seen anybody treated worse than you in the court. It's not even close. He said, you never win on the law. He said, and I'll tell him now, I'll predict how it's going to go. He goes, if it weren't you, I would say that's absolutely impossible. But it's you, and he said, I'm sure you're right. So that's just how it is. I don't expect the law to be applied when I go into a court case. I don't expect it to be applied with this judge in Austin, who's trying to order my entire staff to go show up for unlimited depositions on any topic, not related to the case. Doesn't have to be a related case. We're going to bring you in, and we're going to depose you for as long as we want on any topic we want, and we're going to take as much time as possible doing this for years. And you're subject to my call whenever I call you. Now, I have 38,000 cases. If that was the law, I would never do anything to do depositions. I've never done one. You know why? Because it doesn't make any sense. I can't be called in to do depositions. That would take up I would never get to the end of it. That's all I would do. I wouldn't have time to come here because these judges would be able to say, well, you got to be here this day. And then the next day, you got to be here this day. It wouldn't work. That's why they don't let it happen until now. Now suddenly I have to show up for a case that's been settled, that we're actually saying, fine, we concede. Take the case, go get your money from the legislature because we can't pay it, and the legislature, we already know is not paying it. Go get your money. And yet, we still have to go up and show for a case that we've already said, we're not going to fight it. And they're saying, the judge is saying, you have to fight it. We're going to make you fight it. And I'm like, that's insane. But that's what I have to deal with. And that's what Trump has to deal with.
The U.S. government is trying to pull eminent domain on the state of Texas so that they can have facilities on this side of the border to process illegal aliens. Can you stop that?
It depends on how they're doing. I guess I'd have to get more details on that, but every fight that I could have to stop them from doing illegal immigration, I'm doing. So if you can get Michelle, raise your hand. If you can get her your contact info and tell me more about that, maybe we can. If we can, I'm in.
Yeah, I did watch your trial. It was amazing how it gets bent. You have no mainstream media coverage. It all rots. This morning I got to look at your interview with Tucker Carlson, and it's amazing. You told the story. Is it a force multiplier? Do you think that should be shown more? Can we forward it to our friends and neighbors? Is that?
No, I think it'd be great. It's the first time in 3 years that I actually got to talk about the case. And the reason that I didn't talk about it is because, I didn't want the FBI to ever lock me in on my story because I was investigating them for corruption, and they were able to turn around in my office because they had people in my office. And suddenly I'm being investigated, so I never wanted to go out publicly and say certain things because I didn't want them to know what I thought. I didn't want them to know my position. So I still haven't told the whole story. Plus, I had these guys in my office that were suing us, and I didn't want to get my story locked down there either. I always want them to be surprised when I actually come out and tell the actual story. And so that Tucker Carlson interview was very cathartic for me because the first time I actually disclosed, like, okay, Karl Rove was absolutely involved in this. The Bushes were involved in this. The Biden administration was involved in this. This was no accident, no random thing that Dave Phelan did. He's not that smart. And he's also pretty dumb, but he's not that smart. He wouldn't have figured this out himself. He was told to do it.
Can you recommend that to others?
Yeah, so Tucker Carlson interview, it was on X, and you can go see it. I don't know how many people have viewed it, but it's a lot. And it's about 45 minutes long, but I thought it was a great interview because I got to tell some of the truth that no one had ever said, and no one had ever disclosed these certain people that were involved in this case against me. So you should go listen and then tell your friends.
Last one.
Okay, last one.
Mr. Paxton, thank you so much for letting us know about the judges. During COVID, you took a very strong stand against Judge Eric Moy, and you know what he did. So can you provide us some guidance that from your office, how can you get the message out to the voters that these judges who are causing so much harm, how can we vote them out?
So the only way I need to do is talk about it. Like I was on, part of the reason I was late is I was on the Michael Berry show, which is one of the top 20 radio shows in the country in Houston. I thought it was a 10-minute interview. The longest interview I've ever done on radio. It was like almost 45, 50 minutes. And I talked about all this stuff. I talked about the judges. I'm trying to talk about it whenever I get the chance to speak. I even will try to pull it in on interviews that are not even asking me about it. I'm trying to make people aware and educate them about the Court of Criminal Appeals because people don't know. So this is the only thing I know, and then if you guys will spread the word, then it becomes a force multiplier. It's not just me. It can't be just me. And you'll notice, you don't hear a lot of other state officials talking about this. It's a real problem, and I wish more would. I wish that some of our other state leaders, they know it's a problem, but I'm the only one speaking. And I need the people to speak out and send the message, because if we can win all three races, then it's 5-4, we're still down, right? We're still down a vote, but now they know we're coming. And they're going to be much more careful about overruling state law just by a little writing, overrule 71 years of law, and overrule the Constitution, which they can't do, but they did. If you guys are out there speaking and they lose, I promise you, we are going to make more progress than you can even imagine, other than just winning those three. The rest of them are going to be a lot more afraid to go against you and the Constitution. Right now, they're not. All right, well, thank you all very much.
Thank you all for coming out. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot. And I'll try to get some notes out to you. And we've got a video that we did. We'll see how it works. We'll try to get that posted somewhere, somehow. So, third Wednesday of every month, we're right here. Thank you.